Hey everyone, I want to announce that Love Conquers Fear, with the subtitle Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All, is now available for pre-order at loveconquersfear.org. It is such a beautiful experience to have this book in my hands. The version that you can pre-order now is hardcover. It comes out on June 23rd in honor of the solstice, where the light overcomes the dark. It covers a very broad range of how we're going to transcend all the biggest problems and opportunities we have in the world to enter into that beautiful age of abundance for all. I hope you'll support the work. This is my love letter to humanity. This is my soul song. It's a deeply sacred book that I poured my heart and soul into. Tell your friends, tell them about loveconquersfear.org, tell them about the podcast, and ultimately tell them about this book, because this is the manifestation of all the work I've done on this path, and it is my deep, deep prayer for all of humanity. Thank you so much.
There's no hard data, I think, to indicate that people that take psychedelics become more loving. In my experience in working with people that have gone through this, and my own sort of personal experience, I think that is definitely one of the side effects, you might say. There's an expansion in awareness, right? And that allows for more love to be experienced and expressed. And like you mentioned, love conquers fear, right? That is essentially an elevation in the fundamental dominant emotion that people are experiencing.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Love Conquers Fear podcast. I'm so excited about our guest today. As I mentioned on the last episode with Brandon, this has been an amazing week where I was at the Dell Medical School, and I was with Claudia, the dean, and the president, Jim, when the announcement was made that Michael and Susan Dell have now gifted over $1 billion towards the creation of the new teaching hospital for UT Medicine, which is 2.5 million square feet. It was super exciting, and we're going to dive into that today. Also, I want to remind you that you can go to loveconquersfear.org and sign up for discounts on the book coming out on June 23rd. This is the print proof. It feels so good to have this in hand. It's been such an incredible labor of love. It's a very ambitious work. It covers all the biggest opportunities and challenges in front of humanity, and how we can transcend those with what I'm calling the superfecta, which is the exponential acceleration of AI, quantum computing, robotics, and brain-computer interfaces. The one that you'll order from the website, if you pre-order it, is hardbound and really beautiful, versus this print proof, which was just to allow me to see if there were any final errors that needed correcting. But I'm super excited to dive in with our guest today, so I'm going to keep this short. Greg, it's so good to have you here, man.
Yeah, great to be here, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. So I'd love to dive into your background a bit. First, let's just start off with what you do, because you cover a really broad range. And we were talking about our oldest daughter earlier, and I didn't tell you what her triple majors were, but it's business, psychology, and creative writing. And I know that that's one of your fields, one of those three. So
yes, definitely not the creative writing. But.
No, I know. Well, maybe. So yeah, let's talk about what you do at the Dell Medical School.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at UT Austin. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So my official title is assistant professor and co-director of the Charmaine and Gordon McGill Center for Psychedelic Research and Therapy in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at UT Austin's Dell Medical School. I was just with Charmaine. She was there for the big announcement, as you would imagine. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, Gordon was out of town, but it was so good to see her there.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Amazing, yeah.
So I do primarily research, and a lot of the work I do focuses on trying to understand the brain circuits involved in stress-related mental health conditions like depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. And then using technology and pharmacology, as well as behavioral treatments, to try to modify the way the brain is functioning to have a therapeutic benefit for people that suffer from these conditions. So that's kind of the broad umbrella, but more practically speaking, that is really a focus on brain imaging, a focus on brain stimulation, and then a focus on psychedelic therapies in particular are really areas of interest of mine.
When you think about what you're doing today, like go back in the time machine to the young Greg, and how do you connect the dots?
Yeah, that's, well, I'll take you way, way back, I guess.
Take me way back.
Yeah, so I really learned about, so I think I became interested in psychology and the psyche just through, I think some of it was just a natural inclination, but also in trying to understand the context within which I grew up. I had a mom in particular who suffered from anxiety and what you might call obsessive compulsive tendencies. And that, I always knew in talking with other kids that like something was different about the household I grew up in relative to other people. And so that interested me early on in trying to understand what's going on with her that makes her this way. That led to reading and an interest in psychology, in particular like psychoanalysis, like reading Carl Jung and Freud, and some of the early pioneers in the field when I was in middle school, I believe, and became very, very fascinated, particularly also with the integration that Jung had with psychology and spirituality. I also felt myself to be very spiritual from like an early age.
Yeah, likewise, yeah.
Nice.
I did too, yeah. Not really as much attached to a religion at an early age, but more just feeling deeply spiritual, deeply connected to God.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I was raised Catholic, but never really felt much of an affinity with the church itself, other than the beautiful stained glass windows and you know, depictions in there that would kind of evoke a sense of mystical awe, I guess.
You know, one of the case studies in the Love Conquers Fear book is on the Vatican.
Really?
Because I don't know if you know this, but in January of last year, they came out with what I still consider the best report on AI.
Oh, fantastic. I did not know that.
It's so deeply humanitarian and spiritual and technological all in one report. And, you know, it's cool that that's happening because, you know, spirituality can really rise up to be a great unifier with science in this moment. And it's amazing what the church is doing for that.
It is. It is fascinating and really gets at this question too of how do you wrestle with artificial intelligence and consciousness and the idea of spirit or soul, right? If you know, I won't derail the conversation.
We'll go into that.
Yeah. So yeah, had this interest at an early age. I then went on to college at University of Georgia. Got involved in research early on through basically like an accelerator program where they would pay us a small amount of money per semester to work with a faculty mentor there doing research. And through that, got involved with doing some brain imaging research over there, became fascinated with understanding the brain in particular in relation to how it gives rise to the human psyche and human experience. And then really kind of set on this path to try to focus on clinical psychology, because I also had a strong desire to want to alleviate suffering and help people. I think that's always also been a natural inclination of mine.
I think that goes along with spirituality too.
It does, right? Yeah, it's almost...
And the spiritual path, as you know, is all about alleviating suffering, and that includes deprogramming and reprogramming with what serves you.
Absolutely.
Actually, just even realizing what programs are installed.
Yes, and then there's you sort of clean out enough of your own baggage, right? That then there's a natural tendency or desire to want to help others, you know? And so along that same time period, in college, I read Ram Dass's Be Here Now. You're probably familiar with that
I love
book.
Ram Dass, yeah.
Fantastic.
Have you seen the documentary on Netflix about the end of his life?
Yes.
Yeah, Going Home.
Yeah.
It's very short, but it's really powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
And he was an amazing spiritual teacher, and also a psychedelic researcher.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Which so reading that book and reading about his experiences with psilocybin got me very interested, because I was interested in psychology. I wanted to help people. There was this drug apparently that could produce these profound mystical experiences and life-changing sort of experiences that lead to adaptive behavioral changes in people. And so that piqued my interest, and I decided to begin to experiment with psychedelics. And so I tried psilocybin when I was in undergrad, and some other psychedelics in the form of natural plants that were sort of readily available to be acquired at that point, and had my own sort of initial profound experiences with them, which really hit home to me how the brain constructs reality. It was never more apparent than when you recognize you've taken a compound, it's binding to some receptors in your brain, and all of a sudden your reality is just like a magical wonderland, where things are just completely different than you experienced, a few hours ago.
Right.
And in some way, there's no going back after that. I feel like it's almost like the veil's been lifted.
Yeah.
And now you've been sort of let in on a secret that maybe not everybody really gets to realize experientially.
I've said to friends that are curious about it, I've said, it's whatever your calling is, you'll know if you're meant to do it or not. But, my only caution to you if you do it is like taking the red pill. But I'm at so much of a happier state now, just in terms of lasting happiness and the ability to very quickly realize when I'm going into states that don't serve me, than I ever was before. But it really does, it is like taking the red pill and seeing the reality beyond. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. Yes. But it's beautiful. I mean, the experiences I've had have been beautiful love, beautiful light. So, it also puts you on this path where you start to see the programming that you have that hasn't served you. And some things that just could be mental loops that you're just like stuck in, for a long time, decades. Even.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That, I noticed after I began to undertake some of these psychedelic experiences that it accelerated my own personal growth. And I became much more self-aware, much more in tune, I think, with what I was feeling, much more aware of some of these patterns that you mentioned that, kind of run in the background, but you're not fully conscious of. So completely agree. I think they can be a catalyst for major growth. And that was what really got me interested in psychedelics. So then I began to read and try to anything I could, Stanislav Grof, Timothy Leary, Robert Anton Wilson, learn more about the research that was done in the 60s and 70s on these compounds. And that was a really fun period of deep exploration. And
I'm sure you're reading dozens of books back then.
Yeah. It was, that's back when I had the time to do, a bunch of reading. It was very nice. And
did you dive into quantum physics as well back then? Or?
A little bit, yeah. There was a book I think Robert Anton Wilson wrote that was called Quantum Psychology, which talked a little bit about, it kind of weaved in psychedelics with quantum physics as well. And at that point, I think I did read Fabric of the Cosmos by Brian Wilson, which is right around that period of time as well. So it all sort of, kind of took me down this interesting rabbit hole.
You and I walked a similar path. I mean, I've read over 75 books in the last 15 months on AI, consciousness.
Are you a speed reader, or is that just like,
I'm on a soul quest. I mean, my soul is like so animated in this physicality, and I've seen that this next 10 to 15 years is the most important time for humanity to make a really fateful choice. And so part of it is just kind of arming myself up with enough knowledge, like grasping at whatever this reality is, where I can sit down with a wide variety of people. I mean, I've also read the Tao Te Ching, I've read the Bhagavad Gita, it's pretty amazing because, as you've gone through this big reading journey. It gets you to really start to grapple with what's going on here, and putting all that together and forming that level of pattern recognition, where you can see the pattern recognition between quantum physics and the Tao Te Ching and the Bhagavad Gita, and then these books by psychedelic pioneers and everything else, and putting it all together. It's really, really, you see so much pattern between them.
That's very true.
which helps form your view of reality. And then putting that together with psychedelic experiences I've had, it's been incredible. I mean, it's been such an exciting journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yes, I think you're right. There are a lot of these patterns that seem to recapitulate on different levels, right? In terms of, things like quantum entanglement and even some experiences you read about under the influence of psychedelics, or reports of what people, kind of gets to this idea of there are reports of shared visions or shared experiences, right, under the influence of psychedelics, which from a materialistic perspective doesn't really make much sense, right? But if there is some sort of effect there on a quantum level, that could lead to the manifestation of a similar state of consciousness, then who knows what's possible. But,
All right.
So yeah, I got very interested at that point in my life. I started to want to do research on psychedelics because I wanted to go to grad school. I wanted to do clinical psychology, but that was in the early 2000s, and there was really no research going on at that point in this area. So I then pursued my training. I went to school, went to the San Diego State UCSD George doctoral program and got a PhD in clinical psychology. I worked there primarily learning how to do brain imaging and particularly functional magnetic resonance imaging to look at things like the amygdala that are critically involved in things like anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, mediating fear and other kinds of states of threat. Went on to postdoc at Stanford University School of Medicine and continued that line of research. They're really focusing on how evidence-based psychotherapies for post-traumatic stress disorder change the function of the amygdala and the circuits that it's interconnected with. And then came here to Austin to start my faculty position at Del Med in very end of 2018.
Yeah.
And at that point, had the first sort of opportunity to kind of pursue psychedelic research in the sense of having the academic freedom at that point to be my own sort of guy that could do this.
Yeah.
And that eventually, it's amazing. At first, it looked like it wasn't going to work out, and there was some interest at the time, but it hadn't quite reached the point now where it's almost mainstream. I think that people are talking about psychedelic therapy. But within a year or so, we had an amazing development person come, Gabby Polaire, who you know well,
who introduced us.
Yes, who introduced us exactly.
And then somehow you and I both, spoke at Rabbi Neil's. Rabbi Neil is one of my best friends. He was on the podcast, but spoke at his, lecture series at the synagogue at Agudas Chachim, which was on, I think, the quest for the ultimate reality was what he called it.
Yes, that's right. That was the theme.
I think you were the first speaker.
Was I?
Cool. I'm pretty sure you were the first. I think I was the second, and then Byron Reese, who was on episode 11 of this podcast, was the third.
It was a very interesting experience for me too, because I don't typically talk in front of in that context, right? I'm usually giving scientific talks.
Sure.
Much more sort of like, here's the data, here's the evidence, but yeah, it's amazing. One thing kind of led to another, and now we were able to launch this center back in 2021, and are now really, I think, one of the leading centers in the U.S., particularly in Texas for sure.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because it really was one of these situations where there were just seeds planted all along the path that took time to sort of germinate and develop, but then have now kind of led to this opportunity for me to be able to do this work and to hopefully make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's really incredible. Like, I don't think that you or I would have predicted that President Trump, on Saturday, last Saturday, as we're recording this, people won't see this for a while, signed this executive order, which is fast tracking psychedelic assisted therapy, starting with Ibogaine. And I mean, here we are in Texas. I had Brian Hubbard on the podcast for episode 53, and that guy is a man on a mission for sure.
Oh yes,
he is a force, and he's the CEO of Americans for Ibogaine, and he was right there, alongside President Trump for the signing, and and I wouldn't have predicted that Governor Perry would have been such a vehicle for it, but it's amazing that it's happening, It really is amazing it's happening. And,
It is.
and you know, for people that feel uncomfortable about that, how I would respond, because I've posted about this and I got different comments, is the efficacy for something like Ibogaine so far is really high for alleviating suffering, whether it's a suicidal debt, whether it's an alcoholic, whether it's an opioid addict. And we should have this we should both have the humanity and the scientific curiosity to understand why that's the case at all. I mean, I think it's like kind of miraculous results, really.
Yeah. It certainly looks very, very promising.
Yeah.
The challenge at the moment with the data, at least, is that there's not a lot of there's really no controlled data looking at, well, I won't say that. There's some studies, but not in the US, looking at Ibogaine administration in like a typical medical or laboratory setting.
Right.
But the anecdotal data, the observational data looks extremely promising.
Yeah.
And
You've seen that documentary In Waves and War?
Yes.
Yeah,
Great, exactly. So you see some of the amazing...
people can get that on Netflix that are watching or listening to this, and that documentary is amazing. And I've seen, I personally had friends who have done Ibogaine who have a completely new lease on life. I haven't had the type of PTSD in my life that would warrant doing a big Ibogaine journey. But that doesn't mean I'm anti doing an Ibogaine journey personally. It's just that I don't feel it's calling to do it. But man, I just recommended to a friend because he has a good friend who's really a chronic alcoholic, and I was just like, I would at least investigate it because they can't shake it. I mean, it's really ruining their life, like for a long period of time now.
Yeah.
And they've tried everything, and these a lot of these pharmaceuticals, you have to take them forever, and the efficacy is like really low. And they're really low too for suicidal people. And there's actually even like huge risk if you mix like 2 of these antidepressants together. It can make you more suicidal. It's something to at least investigate seriously and not just kind of write it off. I mean, Brian Hubbard, like when he was on the podcast, he's talking about that he just assumed for sure anything psychedelic was like hippies and stuff like that. And
yeah, not too surprising. A good old boy from Texas,
Not that there's anything wrong with hippies, because I'm from Austin, so I grew up in a hippie town.
Right. Yeah. But, no, nothing wrong with hippies.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all for hippies, musicians, you name it. I'm very much a product of Austin.
Yeah.
But it was funny the way he framed it, and then he tried it himself, and he was like, wow, okay, this is really reframing not just our reality, but it's reframing for him like his own suffering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the crux of it right there, is that, that's the promise of psychedelic therapies, is they have this potential to help people where other treatments have failed. And there's a lot of people out there for whom treatments have failed.
Right.
And so, there's, that's where I think there's a lot of hope here and a lot of promise. And of course, Ibogaine is the way it's like the granddaddy psychedelic, because
it's an intimidating one to even contemplate.
It's intimidating. A very long experience. It's generally not experienced as pleasant from what I have heard from people that have gone through it. It's very powerful, and it also has risks, right? The main one being something called prolongation of the QT interval, which is related to the electrical activity in the heart. And that can be mitigated. It can be monitored, but it's, if you tell people like it could kill you, right? That's oftentimes an incentive to be a little bit nervous, right, about undergoing that type of treatment.
Yeah.
From what we know, those deaths are rare, but they have happened in the past.
Yeah.
So definitely a lot of safety issues that we have to contend with there, but like you said, the potential efficacy profile of it, we need to do the research, but at the moment it looks so promising.
Right. And potentially even figure out how to isolate whatever it is that gives that person the new lease on life. If we could isolate that, whatever that part of the compound is, if that's even possible, without the cardiac risk.
Yes, and there are companies that are trying to engineer Ibogaine-like molecules that have a better cardiac profile. Not yet been tested, as to my knowledge, in terms of in humans or looking at whether it's as effective as the actual Ibogaine. But very interesting development. The other thing about Ibogaine too that I'm not sure if a lot of people realize is it's really kind of like two drugs in one. Because when you take it, it's metabolized to its primary metabolite, which is noribogaine. And noribogaine is also bioactive and has its own sort of effects on the body and the brain. It's also longer half-life, so it stays in your system longer. But it's interesting because we don't, at this point, really know which of those compounds is really doing the most of the work in terms of the therapeutic effect. Is it like a synergistic thing? Could you just give noribogaine? There are companies that are looking at developing noribogaine, for example, alone. So it's a really fascinating molecule and a lot of work that can be done there to kind of optimize it.
And you're familiar, I mean, of course you are, with the studies that show how Ibogaine or Iboga helps the brain regrow as well.
Yes.
Like actually kind of de-age.
Yes.
Which is mind-blowing.
This is the brain age prediction sort of algorithm, I believe, that you're referring to. Yeah. It is quite amazing. And the one thing I would say about that is I think we need to be cautious in interpreting it, that essentially what it is, it's a model based on certain structural brain features that you can look at, and that that model will spit out a predicted age of that person based on those structural features of the brain. So that appears when people take Ibogaine, at least according to some of the initial research coming out, and then you feed the brain afterward into that model, it predicts a lower age than the one that was predicted before they underwent the treatment. The brain itself is not actually getting younger, right? But what it is that it is inducing structural changes in the brain that make it look younger. So in some ways, a little bit like a plastic surgery on the inside for the brain. But ultimately, those structural changes may be responsible for some of the cognitive benefits, some of the mental health benefits that we're seeing with Ibogaine.
Right. But don't we know at this point that even things like psilocybin like form all types of new neural pathways and like increase brain plasticity? Or
yes. So there's pretty good evidence, at least in animals, that these compounds induce something called synaptic plasticity, which is essentially the brain's ability to kind of form new connections amongst neurons and prune old ones. And in particular, there's been a lot of work done looking at dendritic branching and looking at the size and number of these dendritic branches, which are essentially kind of like the radio antennae of the neurons. So across all of the psychedelic compounds, there's a lot of emerging evidence in animals, at least, that they seem to promote this in the period following the acute effects.
That alone is super fascinating. Why do you think that happens? Like, what's your theory?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. There's some hypotheses out there about what that might be related to in terms of the mechanism behind it. I'm not sure why that happens. I think there's theories around just that because these compounds hit so many receptors. So even the classical psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD, for example, we all typically think about the serotonin 2A receptor as being the main one involved. And it is in terms of mediating like that actual experience that you have. But it hits a whole bunch of other receptors in the brain as well. And we don't really understand how they're important or what they contribute. Some people think that it's just the fact that these compounds hit so many receptors that they induce this neuroplasticity effect. There's been other hypotheses related to intracellular 2A binding and binding to a receptor called the TrkB receptor, which is involved in neuroplasticity. And so without getting too much in the weeds, we don't really understand why it happens. But the interesting thing is that it may be one of the primary reasons why these compounds can have such long-lasting therapeutic benefits and allow people to have this sort of rapid behavioral change that they can sometimes come about that may be like the underlying mechanism for it.
I mean, I think you would agree, because that's what you're focused on at the center is like not just understanding like the therapeutic benefits, but also just understanding why this works at all. Like we should have the scientific curiosity to understand why this works.
Absolutely.
We're talking about compounds, plants that have been used thousands of years for all types of communion, both in communities as well as real communion, in my opinion, with the divine. And, we should have the scientific curiosity to be like, how do these plants work this way, at all? Like, why does it do this? And, I've heard the theories on, it kind of shuts down the default mode network and allows consciousness to come in much more purely and in a less filtered way by the ego, because the ego starts to shut down.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and certainly I've experienced that.
Yeah.
I've got the first party experience where I can say it's amazing.
Yeah.
To experience that.
Yeah. It clearly impacts brain function acutely. We know that there's been many studies showing that, and really what it does is it sort of disrupts the way the brain areas are communicating with one another. And when I say disrupts, not necessarily in a negative way, but what it does is, certain brain regions tend to communicate more with certain other brain regions than other areas of the brain. The way I describe it is it's kind of like high school cliques, where certain groups will hang out together and, communicate, and other groups will hang out together and communicate, but there's not much crosstalk between those two cliques.
Right.
With psychedelics, that they seem to increase that crosstalk between the cliques. So it's like integrating information across the brain, information processing. The point, there was another point I was going to make, which I think was pertaining to, I have an interesting hypothesis about, maybe why these compounds have evolved in plants.
Yeah.
I mean, this is my personal sort of, just hypothesis, nothing based on science per se, but it makes
some hypotheses start that way, and then we see whether or not the science backs it up.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
But it would make sense if you think about the planet Earth as one organism, right? Which in some sense it is. Everything is all interconnected in terms of plants, mammals, fungi, all of that. That you would need some built-in mechanism or way to essentially undo maladaptive learning, right? And so, for example, if your mammals, let's say, or your Homo sapiens species on the planet have learned that that other people are dangerous, right, and that they can't be trusted, and we formed these groups where it's an in-group, out-group kind of thing, and we're competing with each other for resources. Having a catalyst to induce new learning and undo that old learning would be adaptive from the viewpoint of the planet, right? And so perhaps these compounds have co-evolved with humans in plants and fungi for that very reason, right? To allow for this altered state of consciousness that allows for new learning to occur, promotes the ability of the brain to form these new connections and potentially then induce behavioral change in a much more rapid way than otherwise would be possible without them.
And the behavioral change being the kind of interrupting those patterns to create, well, I'm going to say more love, like more of a loving nature to take care of the planet as an organism itself, and everything on the planet, whether that's the oceans that we're polluting, whether that's the, animals that we're factory farming, and on and on and on. We have some serious problems that we need to transcend right now.
Yeah, agreed. And yes, I think there's no hard data, I think, to indicate that people that take psychedelics become more loving. But I think in my experience in working with people that have gone through this, and my own sort of personal experience, I think that is definitely one of the side effects, you might say. There's an expansion in awareness, right? And that allows for more love to be experienced and expressed. And like you mentioned, I know this talked about love conquers fear, right? That is essentially an elevation in the sort of fundamental dominant emotion, right, that people are experiencing.
It's really an interesting theory. I mean, it syncs really well with Byron Reese's theory. He wrote a book called We Are Agora, which his hypothesis in that book is that the planet is a functioning superorganism. Like a beehive maintains a constant temperature, even though bees themselves are not that temperature. And it actually maintains a memory as a functioning superorganism. Like the queen needs to go out and say goodbye to the bees if she's actually passing away, because they know her. They like know the beekeeper.
Interesting.
And it's all this fascinating science around just bees and beehives. And there's lots of examples of superorganisms. And he believes that humanity itself is a part of a superorganism, but the planet itself is also part of that. And one of the books I read recently is Stalking the Wild Pendulum. Have you ever read that one?
I haven't.
Itzhak is his first name. I can't remember his last name right now, but just finished it recently. And it's mind-blowing. He wrote, it's a book on consciousness, and he wrote the book in 1976. So I was like 4 years old then.
Wow.
And he hypothesizes in that book that even planets have a form of consciousness. It's kind of like it's kind of like a panpsychist book, like where everything has consciousness, and it's definitely a consciousness is fundamental book. And it goes deep into what he believes is the nature of God. You know, he calls God the creator in that. But it's a very interesting exploration of science and spirituality in one. He got there through deep meditation. It's possible he got there through psychedelics, but in 1976 he wasn't going to write that, because this was in the height of like right after the Nixon administration.
Yeah, they'd come bust down his door and arrest him. Right,
right, exactly. But it's a pretty genius theory. I mean, it's pretty wild that it was recommended to me by a new friend who has produced this documentary called Seekers, and it's all about different modalities of spirituality. And it's a beautiful, beautiful documentary that's coming out, a docu-series. But he had read 130 books, and this was his favorite one.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's wild, because I've read so many at this point that you can kind of see that he was planting seeds that sprouted in books I've read that are from the late 80s and the 90s. But I read it without knowing when he had come out with it. You know, I just read it thinking like, well, this must be a modern book.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, 1976, I can't even believe it.
Yeah, he was, sounds like a visionary, you know,
totally visionary. Yeah, he actually died in a plane crash on American Airlines going out of Chicago at the age, I think, of 55.
Wow.
Who knows what he would have done?
You know, we often think about consciousness as being limited to a particular individual, right? Mm-hmm. You and I, separate consciousnesses, right? But we don't really have any hard evidence for that, you know, even scientifically.
Right.
I mean, clearly, like, you can't hear my thoughts, most likely, and I can't hear your thoughts. But does that mean we're separate entities, right? It's a hard thing how do you actually define that?
Yeah, so it was actually at the Dell Medical School where Gabby invited me to have an experience with Paige Britt, which was a very interesting experience. You know, no psychedelics involved, where she shifted my consciousness, and then later on I had her in this room for what was episode 40, and she shifted me live.
Oh wow!
On the podcast, and I just had to like get my grounding, because I just wanted to go deeply into the experience right then.
Kind of hard to hold a podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
I told her afterwards. I was like, I'm glad that you stopped that, because it made it hard for a moment to even like think about where I was going with the podcast, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And she said, well, actually the point is, like, once you get more practiced, is to be able to still navigate even better and with more intuition as a result.
Interesting.
Which I thought was interesting.
I think that makes sense. It's sort of like learning to almost like operate from a different level, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of like the difference between riding a tricycle versus a bicycle.
Yeah. And you had an experience with her too, right?
I did. It was very interesting. My experience occurred at Del Med. I had just come, I think, from a meeting or something. I met with her.
It was the same day I had it.
It was the same day. That's right. Yeah. And so from what I remember, she, you know, asked me to close my eyes, and then essentially just kind of, I think, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, that I meditate and you know, sort of keep an open mind, and you know, and then closed my eyes and I started to kind of just follow my breathing and meditate a bit. And what I experienced was, it was a little, the environment was a little chaotic because it was like an office in a central space with a lot of glass windows. So there was a lot of people, noise, coming in and out. But what I experienced was I went into a very deep state of meditation very, very quickly.
Likewise, yeah.
Yeah, it was like...
And she went into it with me.
Oh, she did?
Oh, yeah, because she actually knew like what was popping up for me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like afterwards, we were talking about it, and I was like, how do you know that? And we were like, I mean, she was in the conscious field with me.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because I remember her... It was weird at some points when she would give me certain instructions about, okay, now focus on this and try to feel this. And then I would feel something shift in me, and then she would say something like, yes, that's it. Almost as if she knew what I was experiencing.
She did.
Which was
my experience.
Which was was a little almost like, whoa, like what's going on here?
Right. Yeah.
But it was a very nice experience. I felt very calm and peaceful afterwards, and very grounded. I had no idea what to make of it in terms of, the scientist in me was like, I don't know what that was, but I did feel something that was unusual and out of the norm.
Yeah. Have you listened to the telepathy tapes?
I have not.
Okay. It's good. You know what it is, right?
I'm not familiar with that actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know I've spent too much time at work.
I mean, it's good to work. You're looking at a guy who's started 6 companies and been an entrepreneur for 30 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for what you do, I think it would be pretty incredible. I mean, the first season is about autistic children that are non-speakers and how they've been studied to have a telepathic ability with their primary caretaker. And it's like really, you would have to assume that they're all lying. And they're studied with like Faraday cages, their mom's like way far away, et cetera, and writing something, they know exactly what she's writing, exactly what she's thinking, et cetera.
Wow. That's
and
fascinating.
So it's really fascinating. And then season 2 is all about, and by the way, that season 1 became more popular than the Joe Rogan podcast at one point.
It's a podcast show?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then season 2 goes into non-local consciousness as a theory in plants and animals, and it goes really deep on that subject, and it's really pretty fascinating.
Very cool.
I just listened yesterday to Federico Fagan, who wrote Irreducible. He's the guy that invented the microprocessor, and he's formed his own theory of consciousness, which is consciousness is fundamental. And he was on season 2 in April. And, he had a very profound awakening experience with, a very, very profound consciousness experience, not on psychedelics, just like spontaneous. I've had people on this podcast that have had those types of experiences without having ever done psychedelics.
Yeah.
They just had like a spontaneous spiritual awakening. And so it shifted him to become much more spiritual. Because he saw that everything is rooted deeply in love.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a clear message, is that, psychedelics are one tool. They are not the only pathway, right?
For sure.
To, reaching some of these elevated states, you might say, of consciousness.
Yeah.
I mean, meditation for me has been huge.
Meditation's huge for me too.
Yeah.
I meditate almost daily, and my meditations are pretty profound, honestly, at this point.
That's amazing.
Which is amazing.
And sometimes the states you can reach in like long meditations are, I wouldn't call them psychedelic per se, but they are altered and in a way give a sort of similar affective tone, you might say, a feeling of immense love, gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I come out of those just radiating.
Yes, yeah, they're like it's like a little bit of rejuvenation for the mind.
Totally. It really is. Yeah. So, this AI moment, I wouldn't be doing my job here if I didn't ask you about it. It's funny, I call it my job, where I'm just self-funding this whole thing. But
Job is a job, right?
right, exactly. But I'm really my purpose with Love Conquers Fear is I'm really trying to help humanity have this heart shift, because we're in this exponential curve, what I've called the superfecta, where you've got AI exponentially accelerating. You have robotics exponentially accelerating, which are going to be the physical manifestation of AI. At the same time, you have quantum computing, which it's looking like it's become pretty stable, maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, which is going to allow us to do all types of real world modeling that we can't even envision. I mean, it speeds things up so much. And then you've got brain computer interfaces, which, starting with giving paraplegics and others like a new lease on life. Elon Musk says that it's a way that we could cure blindness. And I agree with that. These are just input mechanisms. So all of that is accelerating in this incredible way to manifest abundance if we so choose. And it's a fateful choice that we need to make. We have free will. And part of really the biggest part of suffering, I think, that's occurring in the world is the dogmatic separation of things. I mean, here you and I are, and we're brave enough to talk about something like psychedelics, which was considered taboo for so long. I'm a successful capitalist, you're a successful medical practitioner, with all the schooling. And the dogmatic separation is so strong that it's between political parties, it's between races, it's between generations, it's between countries. And part of what I've seen in my journeys is that we can't play these zero-sum games with technology this powerful. At the same time, like, it is, technology is always the way we use it. And so, what's being built here with the Dell Medical School and the teaching hospital, what I was talking about in the intro for this is so magnificent. 2.5 million square feet, super rooted in AI and robotics from the very beginning. Really cutting edge design for the hospital rooms, like really, analyzing the state of the art hospital rooms around the world and saying, would you want to be a patient there? Even though it's like high tech, it's like cold and sterile, and really thinking about how to make it much more organic and much more collaborative, and, a place that you would like to be if you have to go to a hospital. Obviously you don't want to have to go to a hospital, but if you have to. So I'm just curious how you kind of see this moment.
Yeah.
And your role in this moment too. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's clearly an inflection point, right? I think in terms of, as you mentioned, the acceleration of like the generation of knowledge, just the sheer amount of information that's being generated at an ever increasing rate every second of every day. I mean, my phone is listening to me right now, right? And as is yours,
right?
And probably tracking us, and not to be paranoid or anything like that, but that's just part of the technology we live in nowadays. I think AI is a really fascinating area, and there's at least in my experience thus far with it, and which has been relatively limited. It's not something I'm super knowledgeable about or use extensively, but it has great potential and also, but I think a long way to go in terms of really optimizing on that potential. The main, at least with the large language models and stuff like ChatGPT and Google Gemini, the main issues there is about the factuality, right, of some of the information that you get out of it. It's well known to confabulate things. I've seen, sort of it confabulate citations, right, that don't exist. And this is all a function, right, of the model itself needing to kind of continue to grow and evolve and train itself. But I think if, things proceed as they are going, there's just a huge potential application of AI to medicine and health in general, right? At every level, diagnostics, treatment algorithms, even things as simple as like charting notes and optimizing patient experience. So, at UT, it's like the year of AI, and I think makes good sense that they would proclaim it that, because it's just there's just a super exploding field with just so much possibility there. My role in that at the moment is ancillary, I would say, for sure. Yeah, I know very little about AI other than how to use ChatGPT or Google Gemini, I guess you can say. And although I do have some research ongoing where we're looking at certain types of machine learning models to try to predict treatment outcomes and that sort of thing, but that's a much more sort of specialized case. But I think, one interesting aspect is to think about the potential application of AI to psychedelic therapies. And, I could easily see at some point, and I think there may be people already investigating this, but using sort of AI sorts of generated, almost like a virtual therapist or a virtual guide, in terms of providing education, answering questions that a patient might have. This is, I think, potentially the future of AI is it will start to step in on doing some of the things that humans do at the moment that are, maybe not the best use of time, right? Of course, it's important to answer questions and have the patient feel comfortable, but for routine things that, are day in, day out that they're having to do, like AI could be very useful for that. So remains to be seen. I think there's going to be, as you mentioned, ever expanding, ever increasing acceleration in this, and we'll have to see where it goes.
One thing that I love about your background is your focus on really allowing people to transcend fear. That's a really important part of how we make it, because the scarcity that we've dealt with for most of our evolutionary time is such that we didn't even have electricity until 0.1% of our time on this planet. And it's even less than that percent if you say we're derivative of hominids. I'm just talking about Homo sapiens.
Right.
Like you go back to Homo erectus, et cetera. Then we're actually talking about 4 million years of evolutionary time. Wow. And that's a lot of scarcity, a lot of real serious fears around being eaten by the saber-toothed tiger or whatever else it was. You've probably seen that movie, The Croods. I don't know if you have kids or not, but that's a super fun movie about, him just wanting to stay in the cave and his daughter wants to go outside the cave. And she's basically trying to, she's becoming like...
She's evolving and he's not.
Exactly. She's becoming one of the Homo sapiens that pushed us forward to embrace things like science, and like evolving. It's a great movie. So, let's talk about that. Because what you're doing just to help humanity transcend fear through non-invasive therapy focused on the amygdala is fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great, actually, I love the way you put that, because that's really been a major goal of my whole career, is helping people transcend fear through many methods, right? Even just, I'm a clinician, so I work with patients in therapy. We do exposure therapy, right? Which is a sort of systematic way to help people get over their fears. And then newer work that I am involved in is looking at non-invasive brain stimulation as a way to try to modulate the amygdala and the areas involved in fear and threat. I think it's a really exciting area, because the challenge with therapies is that, like psychotherapy, for example, they don't work for everybody, right? There's it's a lot of time involvement and requires a good amount of investment on the part of the participant or the patient, right? To work on themselves to be able to affect change. And that's not a bad thing, but not everybody has the resources internally, like, to be able to do that. We have other forms of brain stimulation, but they can really only target the outer part of the brain, which is the cortex. And that's not really where the fear lives, per se. Fear lives in the very deep areas in the brain, like the amygdala, and these subcortical structures that are very primitive. You see them in all sorts of animals, all the way down to mice, and all the way up through humans. And there's been so much work showing that those areas are so important for these primal emotions like threat, fear, defensive processing. And now we have a newer form of brain stimulation that's beginning to emerge, is using ultrasonic energy, so ultrasound, to be able to deliver that to those deep brain areas directly. And
what is it delivering again?
yeah, it's essentially it's ultrasonic energy, so it's just high frequency sound waves. They're outside the range of hearing. It's low intensity. There's actually high intensity forms of this are used to like basically ablate certain brain areas for things like essential tremor, where you actually will like burn out the neurons in that region. We don't do that. Ours is all non-invasive and reversible. But it's essentially just focusing that energy on a specific point at depth. And what happens, we're not exactly sure how it works, but the main sort of leading hypothesis is that those sound waves kind of shake the neurons in that area. And these neurons have these ion channels in them that are sensitive to mechanical force. So if you shake it, it essentially allows ions to pass the membrane a little more permeably. And what that does is it changes the firing property of the neuron, because it's all based on ion influx and efflux.
Right.
So by kind of delivering this energy, we're changing that ion balance in the neurons, and then that changes their output and the way that they're firing. So we did a study looking at this in folks with a mix of what we might call internalizing conditions, so things like depression, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder. And we delivered ultrasound to the left amygdala using MRI-guided targeting. And we found a set of parameters on this technology that appear to downregulate a marker of brain function called Bold signal, which is related to functional magnetic resonance imaging. We did that once a day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks on these folks, and we saw pretty dramatic reductions in their symptoms across many different measures, and depression, PTSD symptoms, anxiety. It was all single arm open label, so there was no sham or placebo condition in that component of the study. But the fact that we saw such kind of profound changes by doing this repeatedly really suggests that there may be some therapeutic like legs to this approach, that maybe at some point we could be using this to help people overcome their fear.
It's so important because, all the things I was talking about in terms of the dogmatic separation of things, whether it's including science and spirituality, is fear-based. It's there's this tribal instinct that we have, which, one of my favorite sayings, I think you would agree with this one, is two things can be true at the same time. This kind of dogmatic separation of being like, I'm in this political party and, I don't like everything happening in it, but I'm still in this political party, versus the freedom of saying, actually, let's just look at the things that bring us together and focus on that, because we have a tremendous amount of overlap on the things that actually bring humanity together.
Yeah.
And I think that's true across countries, that's true across races. We're 99.9% genetically identical across this planet. And we spend a whole bunch of time, in fear states about that 0.1% difference, and then all the cultural constructs we have.
Absolutely.
And the more we lead from the heart, the better. I mean, we know it's been wrong for a long time to other people, oppress people, treat them as subhuman. I mean, I'm Jewish, that's been part of what's happened throughout history with Jews. It's been part of what happened in this country, which was bootstrapped, with starting with slavery, to help bootstrap capitalism. One of the chapters in my book is on the objectification of women and all the millennia of suffering that we've had from that. I think the othering that comes out of that root, and now like people are punching down the trends, there's all types of stuff. I think it all comes out of that root, and we still need to transcend that. And so part of the way that I see this is that the heart has to conquer the head. The heart has to conquer the ego. And the ego is there to protect us. It's not like we should demonize the ego. I mean, if I'm about to get hit by a bus or something, it's going to snap me out of that and protect me. But we should through meditation, we should be able to control it.
Yeah.
And the ego out of control actually is very damaging.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, and I often have the problems too that my ego gets involved in my meditation.
Right.
Where I'm like, oh, I'm not meditating good enough, like.
Totally. No, that's absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It seeps in so many ways. And, but I agree with you that, the underlying root of it, right, is about, self-preservation, right, and fear, right, doing what it needs to do to survive at the expense of others, right, and it's wired in, I think, into our DNA, right, to a certain extent. It's the reason why we are at this point now. Like you mentioned, that there's adaptive components to it, but clearly it's not the end state that we want to be at. Right. Living in a state of constant survival, emotions and fear and anger and sadness and all of that stuff.
Well, and scarcity too.
And scarcity,
I had Jamie Metzel on the podcast, which that was episode 18. He just came out with a new book called The AI 10 Commandments, and bestseller, and he's a good friend of mine. Yeah, great title. And Jamie made the point on the podcast that we already have a level of abundance. It's just not distributed. Like, we already have enough food to feed the entire planet. Yes. We just, for whatever reason, choose not to. And part of what I would say is that it's very costly to transport all that. And we worship capitalism. And I'm a capitalist, I'm a proud capitalist, but I'm a conscious capitalist. And it's not profitable to distribute it to lots of poor countries that can't afford to pay for it, and the transportation to get in there, and the lack of roadways, et cetera. And so, I've really personified this Love Conquers Fear podcast and book by focusing on an example in this country of Chad. And in Chad, the GDP per person is $660 a person. In America, it's $86,000. And I had this Uber driver pick me up 4:30 in the morning, and we were just meant to meet. We were just like jamming with each other. It was such a beautiful flow we were having. And I was like, what hope does Chad have? And I was like, I've got it. AI, quantum computing, robotics, right? We got to get things to a point of cost where it makes sense. Agreed. And 18 seconds of the sun's energy, if we could capture it, just 18 seconds would power America's energy needs for over a year.
Yeah.
It's right there. It's so abundant.
100%. Are you familiar with zero-point energy?
No, tell me about it.
Yeah, so zero-point energy is this idea that it may be possible to harvest energy basically just out of empty space.
Ah, okay. And this is like a dark energy type of theory?
Exactly. Yeah, and there's some conspiracy
Our
theories.
youngest knows about this, yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, she's told me a bit about it, yeah.
There's some conspiracy theories out there that people have already discovered how to harvest zero-point energy, and that, of course, then they get disappeared, right? Because of the ramifications.
I have read some of those, yeah.
You probably heard about these, so the ramifications of what would happen, right? Because essentially, energy is really the fundamental, I think, resource, right, that we are after, right? If you could power your house, grow your own food, right? Allow for your own transport wherever you need to go, and do all of that at no cost, right? Maybe even manufacture your own items and, sew your own clothing, right? I'm not saying you would have to do this, but if there was no cost to the energy, then all of this would be essentially free, right? It would be abundant.
Right. But see, that's fear. Like why would that be a bad thing? That would be an amazing thing.
I think it would be amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it would be a bad thing for the people in power that tend to profit or off of. For sure.
Yeah, but that's the period we're in. We're in this period right now where that sounds like heaven to me. Like to integrate unlimited energy out of nothingness, and
no more gasoline. Right?
Yeah,
Don't have to worry
exactly.
about that.
And think about all the ruining of the planet, all the environmental devastation. from that, and all the rationalization that it's like, well, we need it.
And it seems like theoretically possible from a physics perspective, right?
Totally.
That could be something that is actually doable.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think that would just be a game changer, right?
Yeah.
And would really allow for a rebalancing of these forces, right? Because I think, part of the survival paradigm is around control of resources, right? And control, I think is what it comes down to. And without being able to let go of control, and this is something I, personally am working on. I grew up, in an environment where the control was exerted over everything.
Right.
And so I learned that in order for things to be safe and in order to feel comfortable, that I needed to be in control of myself and everything.
Yeah.
And now, having gotten to the point in my life where I am clearly seeing the downsides of that paradigm, I'm trying to let go of that control and surrender, right? And this really gets into very fundamental spiritual stuff in terms of like even in Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step groups, the idea of surrendering to a higher power. But I think that is a necessary prerequisite to kind of experiencing those higher states, right? Of love, peace, joy. And I think that's a big stumbling block in our society nowadays is we have so much control over everything. You can order something off your phone and have it be at your house in 10 or 15 minutes. You can control the content you're watching. You can control the content you're putting out there. You can change the temperature at the whim of at whatever whim you might have. And those aren't necessarily bad things, but the attachment to that control is a bad thing, right? And the fear of not having it is a bad thing.
Right. Yeah, I agree. One book, it's actually a short story. Have you ever read The Last Question by Isaac Asimov?
I don't believe so.
It's a fun one. It's short, but you'll love it on the 0 point energy front. I don't want to spoil it for you. I don't want to go into it because it'll be too big of a reveal for people listening to this or for you. But if you haven't read it, trust me, like the thread we just had, it's pretty wild.
Nice. Okay.
And as you know, he was more of a kind of positive sci-fi guy, which The Lattice is a very positive tale about the years 2030 through 2085. Yes. So I'm curious, we've kind of danced around this on this episode. Like, what do you think this reality is? I've been really grappling with that. And I've been grappling with that since I was a kid, but psychedelics have definitely been a catalyst to make me really have a lot more curiosity. We were talking about our reading journeys earlier, and oh my gosh, I've just been reading all the time. I mean, it's pretty common. I'm reading 2 books a week, and it's just been so much fun.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Just trying to grasp it and put those patterns together. So I'm curious, like, what is your theory of what is this?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I've also pondered that from a very early age too. Like, what are we doing here? What's this all about?
Yeah.
Psychedelics have definitely helped me revise that perspective a bit, So what do I think all this is? I think this is all creative manifestation. I think on a fundamental level, everything is a vibrating energy, right? And we kind of know that from quantum physics.
We do know that. Yep.
And so if it's all just vibrating energy, we might call it dancing energy, right? And so
it does have a sound.
It does it does have a sound.
Yeah. It's one of the coolest moments. Sorry to interrupt you, but one of the coolest moments at TED last week is a talk. It hasn't gone live yet, but it was the sound of the birth of the universe.
Oh, very cool.
And then they actually.
What did it sound like?
It sounds pretty wild. I mean, I might be able to pull it up on the phone. It sounds like very sci-fi. But then they've orchestrated it as well through choirs, but it sounds sci-fi and angelic at the same time. It's beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll definitely have to check that out. Yeah.
And there is this feeling when you hear it of that it feels right, which is incredible, right?
So it's not an aversive sound. It sounds like.
No, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's like nothing we've ever heard, probably.
Yeah, that's pretty much true. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if this is all energy patterns, right, and creative energy, then this is probably the best way I put it is like this is the world is a stage, right? This is like a giant play of universal energy, right? And in my sense, I think the universe is trying to just experience itself in all its possible forms.
Yep.
And we're one of those forms that the universe experiences itself through. And so I think there is also a evolutionary process occurring on the level of consciousness and the predominant sort of states that we inhabit and live in. And I think that part of this creative process and part of what maybe this is occurring in this universe is the universe experiencing ever increasing awareness of itself, but in a way in which it is constantly expanding its own perspective on what it is, right? And that kind of jives with this idea of moving from fear to love, right? I think on a deeper level, the nature of the universe is love, right? Not fear.
Yep.
And fear is essentially just a constricted form of awareness that is focused on specific constraints. But when those things can be transcended, then the universe through us is able to experience itself in a much higher perspective.
Well, I agree with everything you just said. And, it brings to mind this book. By the way, everything you just said is consistent with swinging the wild pendulum. But the other thing that I would recommend is, have you ever read LSD and the Mind of the Universe by Chris Bache?
I have not.
Do you know that book?
Sounds like a fascinating book, though.
It's amazing. He came here to stay at the house. He was on episode 36, so we went really deep on that episode. But he's rooted in deep humility, deep love. Is a deep practitioner of meditation now. But it's the most transcendent book I think I've read on this whole journey in terms of the different layers of reality and the exploration of consciousness. I was clear on that episode, and I'll be clear now, and he's clear on that episode too, that he's not recommending what he did because he did 73 high dose LSD journeys. And by high dose, I mean 600 micrograms.
Whoa.
Which is, I think, the max your body can take.
That is a very big dose.
Yeah. And so we're talking like an 8.5, 9 hour, like super intense journey over a 20-year period. And he had to do all types of like energy work, et cetera, just to even allow his body to take that.
I can imagine.
So he was pretty tough on his body. And in his book, he talks about that he wished he hadn't tried to go so fast. But for him, his purpose in this lifetime was to really understand the nature of our reality to the greatest extent that he could. That was his calling ever since he was a kid. And so he did that to really understand. And, this is not a spoiler alert. This won't spoil the book for anybody. I'd really recommend the book. And I'd really recommend it on Audible so you can hear him read it. But, towards the end of those journeys, as God, which he calls my beloved, takes him through why he was taken through the sequence he was taken through, which becomes basically the table of contents for his book. He sees that there's no end to the layers. So he sees that it's literally as infinite as the universe is, so that there is no way that he's ever going to be able to grasp the entire nature of reality. It's just never going to happen. And in the lattice, I explore that even by the year 2085, we don't fully understand the nature of God. And I don't know if that's ever knowable. Just like I don't know if it's ever knowable to understand the full nature of consciousness. But it certainly is possible through psychedelics, through meditation, through all different means, near-death experiencers, that we see that the actual reality is rooted in love. and that is the highest vibratory force in the universe. I mean, we've seen all types of weird experiments where people are yelling at plants or yelling curse words or giving them loving messages and how they respond. And they do respond. Michael Pollan talks about this in his new book on consciousness, A World Appears.
Yeah. There's I've seen some interesting photographs of plants that have been berated and cursed versus those that have been, sung to or played music, and there's a clear difference in.
And I think that this is thriving. Just intuitive, right? The same thing's true of humans. Mm-hmm. We treat humans that way. We treat animals that way. Again, the heart must conquer the head. Yeah. So I think that's the alignment with the reality, and we're, my personal belief after all the reading we've done is we're souls having a physical experience right now. Yeah. And we're having a physical experience to allow ourselves to grow and allow ourselves to evolve to higher and higher states of consciousness. But we're all part of the same field.
Yeah. It reminds me too of that Rumi quote, I think. I'll probably butcher it, but it's something like, it is not for you to seek love. It is for you to remove the obstacles to its recognition. Yeah. Something like that.
Which is another way of saying calm the ego.
Right. And I like the framing that he puts there too, because what it does is it reminds us that we don't have to do something to become loving. Essentially what we have to do is let go of everything that blocks us from experiencing with that our natural birthright, right? Of love, of being loved and being loving. I mean, you see kids, right? When they're a baby doesn't come out, yelling and cursing, right, and being angry, right? So it's almost built into us as like a fundamental part of the operating system.
Yeah, you put two babies next to each other in a crib, and they're not thinking like, I'm black, you're white, I'm Muslim, you're Jew, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. Yeah, they're just they are love bombs,
Yeah, exactly. So
anybody that looks at a baby's face, you crack a smile. I mean, it's just like it's seeing the nature of God.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it's just a nice reminder of the centrality of that idea. It's kind of it's who we really are until we pick up all of this conditioning and all of these fears and all of this these experiences that's essentially force us to suppress that part of our nature.
I mean, one of the things that I'm so excited about is that this exponential curve we're in is going to allow us to decode more and more of whatever it is. And that to me is super exciting. Because, one of the things that we think we're so sophisticated, right? There's even a collective human ego. And, yes, we are the most dominant creatures on this planet for sure. But we are so landlocked here. We're landlocked on a single planet in a universe that's as vast as we can possibly imagine. I mean, just it almost breaks my brain to think of the size of a galaxy.
Yeah, unfathomable.
And now we've got hundreds of billions. We know this through James Webb Telescope. And, I mean, talk about abundance. I mean, we're just talking about creating energy out of nothing, 0 point energy. But think about all the universal materials out there, and we don't even know if we're in a multidimensional reality. We don't know if we're in a multi-universal reality. We only know what 4% of the universe is even made of. We have no idea what dark energy and dark matter are.
We don't really know anything at this point.
Yeah. I mean, we are really, really, in so many ways we are so sophisticated from where we started 300,000 years ago. The invention of language, the invention of farming, the microprocessor. I mean, just I think the most complex thing we've ever invented are those NVIDIA chips.
Yes. Yeah.
You're talking about something that's so microscopically complex that there's you probably heard that saying that it's kind of like a fable if a witch or whatever appeared and was able to take away all of our technology, and we were just back to, the primitive times, but we had it all in our brain. How long would it take us to make an NVIDIA chip from scratch?
Well, that's an interesting question.
So we don't have any of the refining technology to refine aluminum or anything else. We don't have any fabs. Everything's gone.
It would take me an eternity, I can tell you that.
Well, it would take, I mean, there's all these different theories. Would that take 10,000 years to get back to that, et cetera? It would take a long time.
Yeah.
Because, everything depends on, kind of the superorganism, the collective of all the specialization we've developed to do all the different things from raw material refining to you name it.
Yeah, we're always building on what we've already just built, right? So
Totally,
standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say, right?
Right.
And it's a never-ending process. I kind of like what you mentioned in that book, LSD and
LSD in the Mind of the Universe. And actually his subtitle for that is Diamonds from Heaven.
Nice. I completely agree. I don't think there's ever going to be, we'll never fathom or understand fully what we are and what we're a part of. It's just, it'd be like the drop of an ocean trying to fathom the entire ocean, right? Or understand it. It's just not possible.
You love meditation. I love meditation. And one of the pushbacks I get on this abundance narrative is, okay, let's just assume now we have abundance. We've solved energy. And actually on the energy front, another way to think about that is that should be below even the Maslow hierarchy. It's powering everything else. And that's an idea borrowed from a friend in his book, Deep Future. I actually quoted in here. His name's Pablo Holman. Amazing book about all the deep technology future that's happening now and to come. The pushback I get, and it's usually from my capitalist friends, and as I said, I've been a capitalist my whole life, but they're like, what are we going to do then? Like, are we just going to meditate like the Bhutanese? And I'm like, well, first of all, you're assuming that's a bad thing.
Right.
I was like, the Bhutanese are really happy compared to average American. And I was like, and secondly, there's no end to human curiosity.
Absolutely.
There's no end to the drive, to understand, how far can we go? Can we conquer faster and light speed travel? We don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea that, some people, like if you won the lottery or something and all of a sudden you've got all this money in the bank and you don't need to work anymore, would you just sit around all day and do nothing?
Yeah.
Probably not. I mean, maybe for a little bit in the beginning, kind of enjoy the free time. But at a certain point, you're going to be motivated to go out and do something that's important to you, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's just about what's motivating you. If you're coming from a place of fear and lack and desire, right, which is probably a place that, I've certainly come from before in my life and trying to succeed and provide, then that's different though than coming from a place of fullness where you're inspired, right, to do things and it's not driven by this egoistic sort of desire.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you play the what I'll call the world of form game, there's no end to the comparison machine. Like you could just stay locked into that forever. Swamiji Parthasarathi has been one of my teachers. I've studied Vedanta for a long time now.
Nice.
And he lives in India outside of Pune at the Vedanta Academy, deeply rooted in humility. He's in his 90s now. And he told me a story where he's on this just ridiculous yacht in India. The wealth there is like hyper wealthy, where it's hyper poor as well.
Like there's extremes.
It's big time extremes. And the guy's like, he's standing on this yacht and the guy that owns the yacht's like, you see that one over there across the bay? That's next. That's like all I can think of. I can't even enjoy what he's in.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the moment. There's no end to that.
It's like Jim Carrey, I think, if you're familiar with his journey.
You know what I am, and I'm glad you brought that up. I haven't talked about that on the podcast, but his videos of his speeches now about this are amazing.
Yes.
He is amazing. I'm going to put some links in the show notes on those.
You can really tell he's had a sort of reorientation.
A profound awakening.
Yeah.
Do you know how that happened for him? I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, so my understanding of it is that, he worked very hard, obviously, right, to be the most successful comedian and actor that he could be.
Yeah, mission accomplished in many ways. Yeah.
Mission accomplished. He was one of the, I think, most well-paid actors in the U.S. at a certain point. And got to that point and then realized he was still unhappy. And also could not figure out what he could possibly want to fill that unhappiness anymore. So he got to the point where I'm unhappy, but there's literally nothing left that I could want.
Right.
And that, I think, is what precipitated this inner shift for him.
Yeah.
In recognizing that unhappiness and inner lack is not a function of things outside of us.
Yeah.
Right. It's its own issue that needs to be addressed.
Right. Well, that actually is the common spiritual root that we all come from, is that happiness, lasting happiness, only comes from the inside. Like the ephemeral happiness of, I bought a new car or whatever, that fades really, really quickly.
Yes.
You drive it around for a couple of weeks and then you're already used to it.
Absolutely. And then there's even the more complex or more scintillating desires, right? Like commercial success or fame, renown, right? Respect from others, the perfect relationship, right? Like all these other sorts of things too that we sort of don't recognize as like, yeah, that's also a sort of an outer circumstance, right? That I'm seeking because it seems so socially appropriate, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's, well, you and I are so aligned.
Yeah,
I mean, this is
really enjoying this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I mean, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing with Love Conquers Fear. It really is that transformation that needs to happen for humanity. And, once we get to that fateful age where we've transcended the fear, and, we'll never fully be rid of the fear. I talk in the lattice how it keeps on coming back. But we've made it to that age of abundance for all. Hopefully you and I will jump in a starship and let's go see the edge of space.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. I think, I'm optimistic. I think
I am too.
Yeah. That we, it's as the Charles Dickens wrote, it's both the best of times and the worst of times, I think.
Yeah.
But I have an intuition or a sense that that we will make the right choices to be able to kind of get to the next level of or next stage of human evolution, and that ultimately the balancing forces of the universe, you might say, are going to do and the work essentially that perhaps we can't do ourselves as well.
Well, it certainly feels like the consciousness awakening is underway and that the veil is getting thinner and that lots of things are happening that you would never expect to happen. I mean, I would not have thought when Trump won the presidency the second time that we'd be talking about this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Or the executive order, right?
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
The executive order being signed. I just would not have predicted that. I don't think anybody would have predicted that. No,
it was quite a surprise.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think it's a good reminder of that, we don't really, our predictions are often wrong, right? And that's a good thing sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I love this. And I'm really looking forward to us continuing our friendship and collaboration. It'll be fun to see where UT goes with the Dell Medical School, with the teaching hospital. I mean, I can't even imagine how many jobs that's going to bring and how many amazing people like you are going to move here to go work in that facility.
It's going to be fantastic.
It's going to be absolutely
just an amazing stage of expansion.
Yeah. Well, this is an honor. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You, Brad. Yeah, it's great chatting with you.
A real pleasure.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in to Love Conquers Fear. Please keep sharing this with your friends. There are no ads on this, just purely self-funded. My goal here is to help humanity have a heart shift, and I get so many messages every day, and it absolutely fills my heart with love. So keep it coming. You're making a big difference, and the shift is underway, and I cannot wait until Love Conquers Fear, the book, comes out. It really is the best book I've ever written by far, and really my manifesto and love letter to humanity. Thanks again.